Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us. Today we are joined by Laurel Moran, the Assistant Director at the San Diego Law Library. She is our third presenter for our Koha Community Gifted webinar, and she's going to talk all about system administration in the Koha section. So I'm going to hand it over to Laurel in 1 second. Just want to let you know it is being recorded. We will share the presentation and we will upload all that information for those who can't come. We certainly have this information for you later. You can ask questions, so I'll be here to help with the chat. I may wait till the very end for Laurel to answer anything that I don't know. But Laurel, thanks again for having us, or you having.
Thank you.
Right, you're welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll just launch into it because there's a lot, and we'll keep it to 30 minutes. But what does a system administrator do? So this is basically what I'm going to cover. And for me, in my mind, the definition of a system librarian really depends on where you work. Most of us, I suspect, wear more than one hat and have developed into it over time. And basically, as Nicole Engart indicates in her book, The Accidental Systems Librarian, you are a librarian with systems responsibilities. And that's really the kind of way I think about it. She further notes in her book that system administration is an art and a science, which I also believe to be true, and I'm still learning a lot as I go. So I'll share with you the basics, and these are the main areas that I'm going to cover today. I'm not going to read the slide for you, but these are the things that I think are the most important for you to know. So we use Bywater, so the physical installation and backups and things like that for Koha is really not on us. We are hosted. However, we did a lot of work on the system setup and configuration at migration. And we continue to do this same work when there is an upgrade, which I'm going to talk about later. And this will be one of the most important jobs to oversee as a systems person in Koha. Although in most libraries, it will be a group effort. I think I've given you a link here to the implementation checklist for Koha, and I think it's a good guide, not only at migration, but to look at settings over time as you upgrade. And it's not a bad thing to look at again and again, to look at your settings and try to figure that out. We followed the implementation checklist and the Koha manual to come up with our own spreadsheets that made sure that we make each administrative setting decision or configuration, and that we document those decisions and the thought processes behind those decisions. And we have kept this online and in a notebook. Actually, I still have a notebook since migration in 2016. The reason being is you forget. And you must have something to go back on, as you will not remember every single rationale for why you did something the way you did it, or why a system preference was set one way and not the other. We named ours the Koha decision spreadsheet, and as I recall, it had 13 or 14 tabs of information. One thing I'll just show you as an example, and this doesn't come across really well as on an Excel spreadsheet, doesn't go well on a PowerPoint, but bear with me. This is our patron configuration. This is just an example of how to set something like this up to document your decisions. This is our original 2016 patron configuration, and you'll see the decisions somewhat say don't, do, allow, don't allow. Maybe we'll do it in 30 days. The default's fine, things like that. And we always have a note column for things we might consider in the future. Like we might change to a first valid later, or we might change the minimum password length to 8, but we didn't. There are certain things that we definitely didn't want uppercase usernames, because we put don't with many exclamation points after it. So this is just an example of how you can cut and paste things from the Koha system, from implementation checklists. You don't have to certainly type all this in. It's all there for you to document your decisions. We're presently doing an ongoing project now that'll probably last this summer and the fall, to take a look at all these settings again, because we're many upgrades into it. And while we do document our upgrades and our decisions in the upgrades, we want it all kind of in one place. So we're kind of redoing a little bit of this process at this time. So that's kind of fun, because otherwise sometimes it seems like it's getting away from you. Okay. That's setup and configuration. A bigger basic area to always keep in mind as a systems administrator is keeping track and owning user management and permissions. It's essential to understand how user permissions can be used to allow staff to do their job, and at the same time to ensure that staff only access the system at the appropriate level for their job. So, and it's going to be on you as a system administrator to do this. In my way of thinking, it's kind of a two-pronged thing. Permissions and then login controls are part of this. And permissions are set when you create a staff username in Koha. Anyone that needs to have login privileges needs to have catalog access to be able to log into the staff interface. We don't allow staff typically, except for a very few, to modify other staff's permissions, because if you allow that, you're not going to be able to keep a handle on those permissions because you're not going to know when they've been made and what they are. So we allow a pretty few people to have that. We only have 2 super librarians, and they're both system administrators, although I believe now our IT person is a super librarian as well. We tend to limit on these permissions the ability to delete things. We are pretty lenient about allowing people to do things, but the deletion is part of where I keep a little bit closer handle. You don't want people deleting patrons' reports and things like that. That's left to circulation supervisors and super librarians, but you're going to get a sense of what works for you. And you can always run reports to see what these permissions are. There's a canned report where you can run a report to look at the permissions and get a handle on them at any time. So just know that that's available. One thing we did take away here, and that was actually a system preference, I think, in Koha, we had a lot of staff making inappropriate use of manual credits. And we did cut that off. And you're going to get a sense real quickly about what your pain points are and what you can do sometimes to control them in permissions when you have an issue. We also do login controls, so you can limit staff ability to change login libraries. You can limit what libraries people can log in from. And you can also allow only certain staff to log in from home. And we do this, we don't have any particular way of logging in as like a single login. We are using the username password for Bywater. So we allow certain staff's IP addresses to be listed so they can, and Bywater can do that. If you do a ticket, it allows them to access from home, but we're pretty strict about that. We also have a MiFi device that's allowed listed by Bywater. So if someone's traveling and they want to have a MiFi, their own little network, they can do that. And it's a safer way to do that. We're trying not to have to track too many IP addresses generally. Now, if someone leaves the library, that catalog authorization is disabled right away and their staff account is deleted. So those are one thing to keep in mind to keep that clean. I think the biggest thing to pay attention to and just to know in the area of management and permissions is that they're not static. They evolve with every upgrade sometimes. So you can be sure to check and change authorizations for individuals as they gain knowledge or their job roles change. You have to kind of have your finger on the pulse of that. You also have to consider permissions for lists, but I'm not going to really go into that in detail here, but you can also maintain your lists through permissions. All right, cataloging and metadata management. I'm really fortunate here at the law library that I have a dedicated cataloger who really handles this area and the OPAC, and I'm happy to refer you to him if you have any detailed questions on this area, because I probably couldn't handle them very well, but it's helpful for a system administrator in this area to have a little bit of knowledge of how to import records and what that means for your system, how you're going to manage links in the records, and also keeping in mind as a big picture how your settings in Koha can help users find information within the OPAC and how to improve that findability in system settings. So those are a little bit bigger picture things to think of. In all fairness, we don't typically use a lot of the Koha cataloging module as we subscribe to a bibliographic utility, OCLC, to import records into our system, but we do edit records that we import, and we do sometimes do original cataloging. We use the connection client from OCLC with a corresponding patron account in Koha to bring in records into our system. And we do get record sets from the federal government. We are a depository library, and we also do authority records and processing using Backstage. So we have knowledge in all of those areas. But the bottom line is that we use typically the default catalog settings in Koha for the most part, because our whole idea has been to keep it fairly simple and to do it simply. We do allow certain things that you may or may not be aware of. We do have as a law library, we have a very big area of unbound periodicals. We do allow our staff at the circulation desk to have fast cataloging permissions where they can, on the fly, create a record for a periodical that needs to circulate or someone wants to check out. It's important to note too that there's been a lot of cataloging enhancements over the last years since we have gone live with Koha through Bywater, and we don't use MarcEdit as much as we used to because the Koha system is doing a really good job of enhancements and keeping up with those things. But there's two that my cataloger wanted me to share with you that he thought were really important things that we've done recently. And the first one is he encourages libraries or system administrators to set up item search fields, because this is part of the overall big picture of using your system settings to enhance access for everyone in your system. And it's a powerful custom search field in item search. And we have set ours up, and I think it's set up in the admin section of Koha under item search fields. But we've created them for bibliographic numbers, GPO numbers, local series. The public note one is really important for us to find certain things that we put in our catalog, and we even have SUDOC numbers. So he would encourage that as a powerful way that you can enhance accessibility to your system. And the other is fairly recent. A recent enhancement where we now can do record overlay rules. We mainly use this to protect our records, and we protect our local series. We have textual holdings in 866. We protect our local notes when we're importing records, and in any locally assigned call numbers. And those are things you can do pretty easily, but they're pretty powerful to be able to make your catalog more functioning and available. The last thing, we're just undergoing a couple projects in this area during the pandemic. We went through all of our bibliographic frameworks in Koha to make sure the structures were reflected current MARC 21 standards. It was a good project, and we're doing a little bit of a deduplication effort right now. We've imported records from a number of sources, mainly government documents, which have resulted in a little bit of duplication in the system, and we're trying to work on that. There's always going to be project work in this area, so keep that in mind. Circulation and patron management. This is where, once your system is set up, most of the large projects and changes take place as a system administrator, because system's never static. You're going to have ideas about changing patron types. 3 years in, we totally reconfigured our patron types. You might encounter circulation rule changes. You may have gone fine-free and had to, eliminate all of the costs that you had built into your system. You have record retention periods, like most libraries, of how long you keep patron information in your system. And that's something you would need to keep track of. But here is, as well as where the data gets pretty dirty, because you have a lot of hands creating accounts in your system, right? And Annual periodic cleanups and checks are going to be really important here. And we do this at least annually and sometimes more often when we have a lot of new circulation staff. So your tasks here are really going to be calendar management to make sure that the calendar is updated and is supporting all of your circulation functions and your fine rules. Training, and I'm going to talk about training later, but training staff how to put data in the system so we can retrieve it easily in the future. Collaborating with your circulation department is going to be really important here, and having written procedures and workflows. And now, I'm not a circulation librarian, but I find myself writing workflows for circulation because keeping track of this and making sure everything's functioning here is a really big part of our role. How do we deal with lost items? How do we open accounts? The point of sale training, things like that. I'll talk about that a little later, but the point of sale and cash register functions, how do those work at the information desk? So the staff are never surprised, hopefully, and that they know what their role is and they know how to do it as part of my job. And proactive monitoring and troubleshooting, having eyes on the system here. One thing I do, and I think most libraries do, is probably have a variety of test counts. Mine are not really very appropriately named, but I have a Janet testing, a Bob testing, a Jim testing for every kind of patron type. Because when you do a big system change, like reconfiguring all your patron types, you're going to have a testing plan. So what I do when I have any of those big projects is I document the settings first, because I have had to reverse out of making certain changes. And you want to remember and have documented what your settings were before you made any changes. Then you make the changes and then you test them with your testing accounts. So you can, and then you document what decisions were made and why. You always have to have an out. And if you don't document it, you won't remember what your system settings were before you changed them. I guarantee it. And then checking all those notices and slips and informations. In this area, patron management, there's always enhancements with every upgrade. There's new notices. So you've got to, having those patron accounts, you can check the actual, what an email comes out of your system. What does it look like and what does it say? So you can customize and always see from the patron viewpoint what they're seeing. And those test accounts let you do that. Okay, reporting and on each upgrade, we also review all those settings. And recently, we turned on the OPAC reporting of issues, the catalog concerns, and we tested it out and saw what all those new notices looked like. Reporting and analytics is a huge area of what a system administrator may do at their library. But my advice here is always lean on Bywater. I mean, that's my first point there. It's what they're there for. But on the other hand, learning as much as you can about SQL so you can at least edit reports gives you some independence and confidence in your system. So over time, you will develop a little more confidence. You'll even get so much confidence, you'll make some nice mistakes like corrupting records like I did recently, but I documented so I knew I had done it and what the change was and what the problem likely was. So, don't get overconfident, but you will, and you'll make a mistake and just forgive yourself and move on. Give staff the ability to run the reports. Don't hoard it for yourself, because you're going to not want to be the go-to person for getting all information out of the system. You got to get other people confident in doing that as well. Just advice. Use system generated reports. I use the overdues with fines in the circulation module all the time to see if we're heading toward problems with certain patrons having overdues. We use the stats wizard. We use the Koha reports library all the time. My advice would be, and this is a little screenshot of our page, is organize your reports. I didn't do that right away when we migrated, and reports are going to get away from you if you don't organize them. So we review and delete reports that we don't use on an annual basis. We check them to make sure if on upgrade something that they're running as we expect them to run and they're not throwing an error, because there's nothing worse than having a report and it looks like exactly what you want and you run it and something's changed and now you can't get any data from it. So you want to keep up to date on those. Bywater is usually really good at flagging major areas, where certain changes might affect reports that you have, and that's very nice. And use the note field and the descriptions to make the reports as descriptive as you need to find them, because you're going to pull in a lot of reports to your system and you're going to not remember exactly what they do if you don't put a note there. So we have a number of reports that we only run at fiscal close, and we have quality control reports. We have a tab for testing reports, serials, just patron reports, circulation, catalog, acquisitions, and things that are account specific to the accounting system, and fines reports and things like that that are specific to the account lines. All right, system maintenance. We're pretty good for time, I think, because I usually talk faster when I actually give, not practice the presentation. So a few things of what we do, what I really suggest is whatever system you use for communication in your library, and we use Teams, create a channel. We created a channel in Teams for just Koha upgrades and training. And so here's just a screenshot of what that kind of looks like. I'm making a post to everyone in the library, and this goes out to everyone. This is a nice enhancement for the iDesk. You don't have to just totally, you can edit messages now. This was a really big deal. You don't have to create a new one or totally delete them. You don't have to add information to existing messages, and that was really neat. And our circulation people were excited about that. And then there's one from Chris, who is our cataloger and my co-system administrator, that Koha 2211 is coming. Here are the links to all of Bywater's training videos. So that's one thing that just gets hope. It's going to be a challenge to get everyone involved because they're all busy, and getting them to look at the Bywater videos and realize how that's going to impact their daily functions and their work is a struggle still. So we as system administrators do try to review all these videos and try to highlight in this Teams channel just the enhancements that are going to impact their day-to-day work. We try to also give them choices. For example, if this is a great enhancement, looks cool, would you use this? And sometimes they'll say yeah, they'll say no, but getting buy-in here is really important, and I think helps everyone in the library feel that it's their Koha. It's just not the system administrator's Koha. On the day of upgrade, we start checking. We usually have a checklist that looks like this. You can see I'm a big spreadsheet person, but we're going to have a list with a hyperlink to all the features that are coming in this new upgrade. And we're going to note what the change is. Is it controlled by a system preference? Because we're going to watch for those that we have to turn on, or maybe we don't want the default. Do we want to turn it off? Yes, no. And then the possible implications. And these were all kind of not applicable. These were all nice enhancements. We didn't really have to do anything on this, but sometimes we will. At the bottom of the tab, you can see we divided up acquisitions, cataloging, circulation, patrons, administration, and we just we split it up and we take it day by day. So we know what we're looking for when we go live with that new 22.11. I think this was a little bit dated, but a few things to also look at and be concerned about is viewing your system messages weekly. I'm not always good about doing this, but in About Koha in your system and system information, if there are errors coming up, you've got to pay attention to those and know that they're going to be listed there. Paying attention to your notices. Right now, I'm all about notices. I'm doing a major notice configuration project right now. So it's just something I feel in my gut that I've kind of let slip, and there's been a lot of changes to notices. So that's something we'll just call it, make it a project, do a project plan for it, and do it. Monitoring your log viewer in tools, browse system logs, just taking a look at that and seeing what you see there. Are there any problems? You're going to see your cron jobs in the log viewer and see if the cron jobs are all running as you would expect them to do. And then just periodically monitor any customization. Usually on every upgrade, we have we try not to do much customization, but we do have a few things on jQuery that on every upgrade, we just check to make sure that's been carried over as we would expect and operates as we would expect. Testing, if you've got any third-party connections like PayPal, Overdrive, periodically just make a note in your calendar and Outlook or whatever you do to keep track that those are all running as you would expect. Okay, this is an area that we've done a lot of big projects in, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but we have closed 3 library branches. We've totally changed our patron types. We moved from calendar to annual membership. For our borrowers, we are a membership library, and we set up and started a point of sale, and we've done an entire inventory. So all of those things are projects that you as a system administrator would likely be involved in. This is just a few examples, a cut and paste of some things we do when we're doing a big system change project. On the left side is just the steps that I put when we closed libraries, like making sure no items were coded, making sure no patrons were coded to that library, and just step by step, if were there any location codes, things that you had to check just to make sure that you removing that library wasn't going to have some deleterious effect on your system, something you didn't expect. One thing that we did encounter that we didn't expect is if we closed all the dates on a calendar of a location, it did impact how the calendar would just look and look and look because it was going to run through all your libraries. I don't know if that's going to happen anymore. So even though we had closed a library, we had to keep it open one day, just fictionally in the calendar. So there are things that you wouldn't know unless you tested. That's just an example of the point of sale project that we did too. Data accuracy, big part of your job. Patron cleanup, reports that catch errors, things like that. This is just an example of what we look for in patron records, and we run it on a regular basis, usually at fiscal close. Are the barcodes too long? Do you have anything in your system that expires too far in the future? Are the zip codes entered with the right amount of digits? These are all quality or data checks that you can make on your data. And if you want to get quality patron data out of your system, you've got to do the checks to make sure that you can actually pull the stuff, because if it's not entered, I perennially am fighting with our reference staff about entering California. They just like to type out the whole state, and that's not how we do it. And it's in their documentation, but just keeping it cleaned up, pretty simple. Run a report, do some filtering, and you can see it. There are a ton of quality control reports in the wiki for reports. Use them. We tend to use them on null item types. We tend to do it on at fiscal close. Speaking of fiscal close, we have an entire spreadsheet I can share with you if you want. It's not going to be too readable, but it's multi-tab. So everything you do at fiscal close, it gives you the Koha report language, what to do, how to run it, when to run it, document that you ran it. And it's really much smaller than it used to be, I promise you, because Koha is much easier to close than Millennium was. So, but that's just something to think about. And in the interest of time, I'm going to skip to my last slide because I don't want to keep you all over. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Training. I go by a hub of the wheel concept, and I think the system administrator, really the best thing you can do is keep everyone informed about upcoming changes and help gauge the impact of those changes, because you don't like your staff or your customers, and you don't want them to be surprised by things. Do tickets to Bywater? Do tickets well. I have not always done that. So I tend to just throw off a ticket, but it helps so much if I can do screenshots, error message, articulate as best I can what the problem is. If you lock yourself out of your system like I've done, call the 800 number. I didn't do it, actually. It was our IT manager. I didn't do it, but we've done that. So, join the online groups. There's a system administrator group at Koha US. Most of it's over my head, frankly, but they are a good source. And stay updated. You're going to feel overwhelmed. Bywater is super good about training on everything. You can't always do it all. You're going to feel like you should listen to all those videos, do your best, be kind to yourself, and document your procedures and workflows and train on them. Be happy to answer any questions.
Laurel, wow.
Sorry, that's a lot, but I got through it in 30 minutes.
Impressive though, the level of detail that you have put in. And I was just, doing the math that you've been with Koha for 8 years now. So that's a long time. And you
Yes,
have seen a lot of changes
a lot,
since
a lot.
2016. Yeah.
Hmm.
If anybody has any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. As we said, this is recorded. Laurel's going to share a presentation, and I'm really just in awe. I wrote down some really interesting notes to myself, which I won't be able to read later, but I do want to say that this would be an exceptional webinar to share with partners that are going live, or maybe in like 3 to 6 months after they go live, to say, hey, have you thought about doing something, setting up some testing or, projects that will get you to the next year. So
Hmm.
this is a really great opportunity to be able to see somebody else's processes using Koha.
And I think it's just going to be so individual to you. And I think the biggest thing I've learned, I'm not a systems person. I'm not an IT person. I'm an accidental systems librarian, right? And I came from reference. I did legal reference mostly. I was even new to technical services when I started here. So you can do this. You will make mistakes, and you just have to know you have to be bold, and you have to be willing to change things. And if you don't want to leave your system sit static, but if you have the testing accounts and you make a plan for yourself, you can always go back. There's not too much you can do that will not be fixable, because I've done things, and yeah, most of them they've all been fixable. Yeah.
And, one doesn't need a quote unquote system administrator with Bywater Solutions as
Nope,
their support, but
do
it's
not.
good to kind of see what a system administrator is doing for those libraries that don't have one, to say, oh, I can absolutely like be in charge of patron data cleanup at the end of
Mhm.
the year, or something that's really
Yeah.
empowering to get. And I also really, and we'll just wrap up now, but I really appreciated you getting all your staff involved in upgrades and getting that information out to them, because I think it's important for not only directors and upper level people to see what's happening, but to be involved, everybody, at least to know what's coming down the line, and
Yeah.
kind of be able to play around with it, on a test site or whatever. So,
Yeah, you don't if they go have an upgrade and they don't even notice it because they're ready,
right.
that's great. You don't ever want to make a big change without buy-in from the people who are actually going to be doing the job at the desk. And maybe that's
Mhm.
the best thing of me actually having worked on the desk and done circulation and patron records. I don't want to have that happen to me when I'm also trying to help somebody, and I wouldn't want to do that to somebody.
Yeah, we want a happy Monday. We don't want to,
Mm,
what the heck happened Monday?
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for doing this again. Thank you everyone for coming, and have a great day.
Thank you.